and Top Management. And our honorable guest, Professor Aasim Padela, Professor Vice Chair of Research and Scholarship, Department of Emergency Medicine. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yang berbahagia, Profesor Dato' Dr. Muhammad Saufi bin Awang, Hospital Director, Sultan Ahmad Shah Medical Center at IIUM. Yang berbahagia, our honorable guest, Professor Aasim Padela, Professor, Vice Chair of Research and Scholarship, Department of Emergency Medicine, Medical College of Wisconsin. Dr. Siti Zainab Tauhid, Director Administration, Sultan Ahmad Shah Medical Center. Dr. Muhammad Yusuf bin Muhammad, Representative from Kuliah of Allied Health Science. Professor Dr. Abdul Razak Abdullahi Hashi, Representative from Kuliah of Science. Head of Departments, Professors, Consultant, Specialists, Officers, Matron and all staff. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good evening. To our Honorable Datuk Datin Prof, Doctors, Brothers and Sisters. Today, to gain the blessings for the ceremony, I would like to call upon Brother Alif Zaini from the Department of Sharia Compliance to lead the Doa recitation. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirrahmanirrahim. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya'i wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma ja'al jam'an hadha jam'an marhuma wa tafarraqana min ba'di tafarraqan mahmuma wa la taj'alillahumma fima wa ma ala taqiyyin wa la mahruma. Rabbana 'alaika tawakkalna wa ilayka abna wa ilaikal masir. Allahumma tawwil ahmarana wa sahih أجلنا وثبت إيماننا وسمع أرزاقنا وحسن أخلاقنا ونور قلوبنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اجعل من أهل الخير واجعلنا من أهل البركة واجعلنا من أهل المعرفة. اللهم اجعلنا من أهل الجنة واجعلنا من أهل الفردوس الأعلى برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم اجعل مجلسنا هذا مجلسا مباركا وأصحابنا وأهلنا وذريتنا وضيوفنا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So Allah, we made us today to express our gratitude for your invaluable grace. Make us your servants who are always grateful, whether it's small blessing that alone a blessing that is abundant for us. So Allah, give us a blessing on the journey of the first year today, that you are the most knowledge that we are here to seek your favor. So bless our coin still, send our hearts to your light and your guidance. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Thank you to Brother Alif Zaini for the Doa recitation. May Allah grant our event with His infinite blessings. I am Muhammad Khairi bin Abdul Malik from the Department of Pathology, will be your MC for this evening. Alhamdulillah, we are now gathered once again in this hall to attend a special talk this evening. The objective of this talk to explore the intersection of faith, ethics, and modern healthcare, offering valuable insights for professionals in our field. Now, it's a great pleasure to welcome Prof. Datuk Dr. Muhammad Saufi Awang, our Honorable Hospital Director of Suspect and IIUM, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Please welcome.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil mursalin wa ala alihi washabbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah, praise Allah Subhanahu wa taala, most gracious, most merciful, and salam and salawat Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companion. Thank you very much to the chairperson. On this note, I'd like to take this opportunity to once again welcome Prof. Aasim This morning, I think we had a very fruitful discussion on many things, changing of ideas, how we can move forward. In particular, there was we talk about ethics. So Prof. Aasim is, as mentioned by the chairperson, he is an emergency physician and also professed in the bioethics and medical humanities, right? So there are many issues that he will talk today. So without further ado, I pass over the floor to Prof to enlighten us, especially on the Muslim vision for medicine and healthcare. Thank you very much. Over to you, Prof.
Invite Prof. please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا بفضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Bismillah, it is really an honor and pleasure to be here with you today. Alhamdulillah. I'm delighted to be at this university, in this place, and to be able to share with you some thoughts. Perhaps what I'm going to share today is already known and already baked into the institution that you're all inhabiting, but perhaps this will remind ourselves why we're here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. That if you're amongst those who give thanks, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, He promises us Yazid, He will increase us. So may we always be in a state of gratefulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because actually one of the key points that I'm going to leave you with, it's not on the slides, is that when we, and I imagine many of us here are healthcare providers, right? We are delivering care to others. And we think we are the ones who are helping others. Yes, the whole point of healthcare. But actually, it is we who are elevated through that service. It is we who are benefiting when people who are ill and sick and in need come to us. It is not we who benefit them primarily, it is they who are benefiting us. And you will see, I will mention that later on in our talk. So Bismillah, I don't know who everybody here is, but I'm going to have some times I'm going to ask you a question, and I would appreciate, because I need to stay awake, you need to stay awake. So I'm going to appreciate that you do answer that question so that we can move forward. So alhamdulillah, as I mentioned, I'm privileged to be here. I want to tell you that my story with this institution came when this institution this hospital was going to be built, because I attended a talk in Saudi Arabia, maybe 2014, 2015, where there was an individual who was talking about they were going to design a hospital that was Sharia compliant, and that its design was going to be Sharia compliant. I knew that you can do medicine Sharia compliant way. Imagine we're in Saudi Arabia, but they know the design is going to be Sharia compliant. And so he presented the idea that we used to have in our tradition, people would think about where there should be corridors, how light should come in, so that the environment was healing. And the idea was to reclaim that, to not let the modern notion of this is how we build hospitals or this is how we build buildings be what we just adopt, but rather we are very intentional in how we design the space. And in the little tour that I received today, I can see that, right? That we have to create healing spaces, and that needs intention. I looked at your mission when I came out, and this was also back in the day that the idea was that this hospital was going to not only just do as a mission, Islamization, and then the rest follows, but in the end, that the care that is delivered is going to be Sharia compliant. So from the beginning to the end, the thought in the beginning that there is going to be some Islamic component to this hospital, and then we're going to proceed with care delivery. And at the end, when care delivery is happening, it's going to be compliant with at least the Sharia. So I heard about this institution before it was built, and today, alhamdulillah, for the first time I was able to be here. But I'm going to tell you myself, you heard my academic sort of qualifications or postings, but what I do in terms of scholarship is the following. My interest, I come to you from the United States in a Muslim majority nation, is that I study how Islam, right, as a tradition, Islamic identity, right, the thing that we hold and people know us by, how that influences the way in which patients think about their health and the health decisions they make, and how that impacts the interaction between the patient and the doctor in a non-Muslim setting. I study how Islam informs physicians, their identity, right? The ethical challenges that they face. And how, in my context, in the non-Muslim context, being a Muslim might lead to discrimination for physicians, right? And for patients. And then I study how the notion of Islam is used by fuqaha and ulama to create bioethical guidance. So the work that I do as a scholar is at the intersection of Islam, right, Muslim tradition, practices, and the healthcare system, and involves what I would say theological, textual, and empirical work. Because what we're trying to do is not just think about what we should be doing, but how we should be doing it, and then we need to assess if that is met, right? So this is the work that I do. When you see me speak for the rest of the talk, I'm going to refer to things, and particularly in the Q&A, that we have to bring in conversation the empirical with the theological, right, and then the textual. That all three, when we think about Islam or Islamization, need to come together. So that's all preamble. So now I'm going to give you 3 parts of my lecture, and we're going to start having some questions shortly. So be ready. So the first part of my lecture is going to be about the modern medicine and the maladies of modern medicine. And I'm going to detail for you what that is. The second part, we're going to talk about Islamic conceptions of health and healthcare. And I assume, because I learned today, the Department of Sharia Compliance has a lot of courses and lectures and training and certification. That second part, you all know. But I will just remind you of it. Right? As the Quran tells us. And the last part, I'm going to offer you a vision for healthcare that perhaps you will notice that already is baked into your institution, but there might be ways to enhance it. And if Allah Ta'ala wills, we can do that together. The first thing I will say about the modern maladies of medicine is that the building that we are in is called the hospital, right? And so it should be about hospitality. But in many places in the world, it is not about hospitality. It is an in-hospital setting. It's inhospitable to the people who work there, the clinicians, the staff. It is inhospitable to the patients who come there, right? And so its mandate, just the name that it is given, is not what is experienced by those who are inhabiting that space. And you know this, and I assume I'm speaking mostly to providers here, because you will notice that there is, and I can tell you this from the Western context, at least, but I have some indication from what I saw online that this is true in Malaysia as well. There is increasing levels of dissatisfaction amongst clinicians with medicine, with their profession. That there are higher levels of burnout, right, and anxiety and mental health disorders amongst clinicians and providers. Those who are supposed to be caring for others. That there are people who want to leave the profession of medicine, even though they have been qualified within it, right? That they are no longer flourishing, they're no longer finding purpose within the way that healthcare is delivered. And this idea was really made very clear to us in the middle of COVID-19 pandemic. I'll say that in the United States, that we found that it wasn't just that the healthcare system didn't work for clinicians, but it really didn't work for patients, and it didn't work for patients in a very clear way. That on this side, let's see, the pointer works? Yeah. So on this side, we were focused on all these things about healthcare, about access to healthcare, about the health conditions, but what really was affecting our patients was all these other things, the social determinants of health, right? And so what would happen is that physicians and clinicians would try to tackle these problems, but their origin was outside of their control. And the healthcare system, in the way that it was set up, was not set up in a way to address these other aspects very well, right? And so when we had, at least in my context, we had disparities amongst people of different races. The disparities in care were because of conditions outside of the hospital system. I have a Muslim ICU director at the Rush University Hospital in Chicago, and he said, I'm going to give you a real example here. Because we have limited ICU space in Chicago, right, a city of many millions of people, People did not want to accept COVID-19 patients into their ICU. They were very care intensive. And so we had noticed that those hospitals that were located in populations that were underserved, their doors were closed and patients couldn't get into the ICU. So he said, a Muslim, right, in a sea of non-Muslims, that that's not why I went into medicine. My ICU will remain open for transfers. And I'm going to create another ICU, and I'm going to create a third ICU so that anybody from any hospital in Chicago who needs ICU service for COVID-19 will be able to come to my hospital. He had just become the CEO of that hospital before COVID happened. Okay, he did that for the first part of the wave in the United States. He was an ICU director, so he said, I will not have disparities in delivery. So he was tracking, this was his quality metrics, that people will have the same outcomes. We're going to provide all the care that is needed. We're not going to ration our ventilators or so on and so forth. So he published work showing that even though people were from indigent backgrounds, they were seeing the same level of care and quality of care. After almost a year of doing this, he was called by the board of directors. The hospital was losing $30 to $40 million a year. He was a new CEO, right? So when you are losing money and you have a new young guy as the head of your hospital, what is the easy solution for the board of directors to do? Khalas, it's your fault. So he literally says, this is his story, he says, after that meeting, I felt that I'm going to have a job, I have a child, and so I'm going to go for Umrah. So that night, I booked a flight. I went for Umrah, and I made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because, I had no recourse. What are they going to do? They're looking for a scapegoat. They're going to fire me. We're losing money. I was trying to do something nice, right? So he comes back from Umrah, and someone interviews him for a newspaper. Oh my God, you're doing so many amazing things. Their mortality rates are similar. That press led to the governor of the state to come visit the hospital, led to donors who are on the board, right, who buy these, whose names are as donor philanthropists, to say, oh, this is amazing work, we want to be involved with it. So that $30 million hole became like a $60 million gain for the institution. Money is everywhere. But the point was that he stuck to his values. And then he relied on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think I'm sharing this with you because, I don't know what exactly happened in Malaysia. I wasn't here. But the story of there being disparate care and financial drivers that are affecting the way that we deliver care is true. And in COVID-19, what I saw online was this was a problem here as well. Right? So we should be thinking about the fact that physicians have a good heart to do something, but the forces that be in medicine sometimes prevent us from doing the right thing. That's the first malady of healthcare. Now, how do you solve that? And so you'll see headlines from your own newspapers here, right? That there are individuals who note that the problem in Malaysia is that we have a healthcare system that's a brink of crisis, with healthcare workforce leaving for greener pastures south, right? That we have skyrocketing healthcare costs, which are problematic, and that there is some disparity in care amongst the different populations within Malaysia. And they suggest reform is needed. I don't know about your population, but this narrative is not just unique to Malaysia, it is everywhere. And some truly say that the healthcare system needs to be totally reformed and rethought about. So centers that say that we are living out an Islamic vision of healthcare, I would like you to think about what that means for you. Is it just at the level of the patient-doctor relationship? Or rather, your vision must be the light, the guiding light for our society. And I'm going to address that near the end of my talk. Okay. So what we see here in terms of physicians and clinicians being disheartened by healthcare, one might say disenchanted by healthcare, is a symptom of a larger problem. So we see these symptoms, the question becomes, what is the core causes of that? Or in this case, in the metaphor, you see the branches, and you say, well, what's the size of the trunk? But really, we need to get at the root of it, right? So here are my questions for you. And I would like to hear a couple of people answer, but 3 questions. What is biomedicine? What is healthcare? And what is the relationship between the two? So can someone offer me some ideas, or us some ideas? Aren't you the Department of Biotechnology? Ah, so you should be able to answer these questions. Anybody have any idea? This is going to be a long talk.
Medicine, why we say about life?
Okay.
Define what the good life means.
Okay. So bio is about life, you said, and we have to define the good life. So what is biomedicine, though? Then how does biomedicine work?
Yeah.
Wikipedia. Any of your students here?
Science that applies biological and physiological principles.
Mashallah. Okay, mashallah. Okay, so we have biomedicine. Someone took care of that. So it is a subfield that relates to allied health professions. Okay. What about healthcare? Since we're all in this hospital, what's healthcare? Hmm? No one has. I'm not going to call on anybody. I'm your guest. It would be very odd. No. You gave me one answer. The mukh is needed now. Okay. So that science applied to the application that applied to whom? Or where? Okay, to society, perhaps, right? Okay, very good. So we have a science that's applied to society. That would be that's the relationship between the two. So let me give you some thoughts on that. What biomedicine is truly a paradigm, right? It is not just a science, it's a paradigm. It's a way of looking at the world, a worldview almost, that involves certain commitments about how we know and what we know, the epistemological components, right? And some philosophical commitments about what we want to do. It is truly like these glasses, right? That you're looking at the world. Biomedicine is a certain paradigm of what you will see and how you will see it. And then how you will interpret what you see. That's what biomedicine is. And it has, this is a sociological sort of view, has three components that let us think about is what we see and how we interpret what we see, or what we see and how we understand it. The first is that diseases are tied to biological, chemical, and physical phenomena. Right? So what is occurring to our patients and ourselves is tied to origin. The grounding of that is within biology, right? In the hard sciences. That's the first commitment of those lenses through which you view the world. The second commitment is that knowledge that is prioritized in the hierarchy of knowledge is that which is garnered through experimentation, empirical experimentation. That's why we have, right, translational research, bench to bedside, right? That what is privileged knowledge and knowledge that is garnered through interrogating the body. So you have the hard sciences as what explain what's happening to people. Then you have how do we figure that out? Through experimentation, right? Through empirical experimentation. And then the third, so it's a materialistic body of knowledge. The third commitment is that it's beholden to the notion of reductionism. Meaning that you can explain everything from the smallest components. There's no such thing as from top-down causation. Rather, the base component of something, the subatomic particles, explain everything that's happening at the organismal level or beyond. That is biomedicine. You're sitting at a hospital that says this, right, Islamization, and that we're doing Sharia-compliant stuff, but this is the system that you are operating underneath. The core commitments. Healthcare is not what the answer is in a sense, right? The system that comes out of biomedicine. But if you really think about healthcare in totality, it is on a societal level, the sum total of all responses of individuals to move from a state of illness to wellness. when you have a headache and you say, I'm going to have some caffeine because I'm caffeine deficient as a doctor right now, you're interacting with healthcare. There's no one there. You're doing healthcare, right? You're caring for your health. So it's the sum total of responses. Those responses in society can be organized in the professional sector, what we might call this sector here, but it could be in the folk sector. So I might go to some herbal shop and get some herbs to take care of my headache. Or it might be that I ask my family, so I'll go into the sort of the popular domain, or go to what I just said, go to some pharmacy and get something off the shelf. What we do is only part of healthcare. But what we have done, and through the biomedicine paradigm, is reduced all of healthcare to just allopathic medicine. Right? And I'm going to make a statement now that will hit you later. We have reduced all of Islam to Sharia as well. Right? And all of Islamization became just Sharia compliance. Just like all of healthcare became just what we do. Though we know on both registers that healthcare, this interaction with the patient and the physician, is only 10%, maybe 15% of someone's total health. Right? It only affects 10 to 15%. It's actually the minority, not the majority. So the malady of healthcare is what? That we have dominated this picture and have become beholden to these commitments, philosophically, epistemically, but also we've ignored everything else. And what happens with that? So that system, we might say, doesn't come from us, right? From the Muslim environment. Well, perhaps it comes from the West, or fine, but medicine is globalized. So the academies through which we recruit people here, or to teach us, or to build our systems, right, come from the same origin. So these are hospitals. This is in Bahrain. This is in Qatar, the medical school in Qatar. This is in Abu Dhabi or Dubai. Right? So these are the privileged centers of learning for medicine, for biomedicine, and they instruct us on how to organize a healthcare delivery in the society. So every education is developed through a cultural paradigm and lens. So there we have biotechnology and skills transfer from west to east, so to speak, through a certain paradigm of how to deliver and what it means. At the same time, they tell us how to resolve problems in a missionary bioethics way. So I'm sure you all talk about the 4 principles of bioethics, right? It comes from some rootedness. So this notion, I think, of an alien culture, alien paradigm, something we should contend with. Again, if we are living out, I'm giving you this talk because you're at a hospital, you're at a university that starts off, our rootedness is in Islam. To say that, you must recognize what you're operating under, right? Firstly, and then say how we Islamicize or make ourselves Sharia compliant. So I mentioned this idea of reductionism, right? And that's the idea. There's no downward causation. If I were to ask you, what does that mean to you as a Muslim, you would say that's not possible, right? Meaning that, is it possible that your neutrons explain your behavior? Is it possible the genes explain your behavior? That's all of it? But we operate on the guise that this is true. And not only do we operate on the guise, we teach in that way. So the first experience in many places in the world that students have with medicine, learning to become a doctor, after they get their white coat, is to go to this anatomy lab. And what are you doing in the anatomy lab? You're looking for some morphological abnormality that explains disease. The first normative experience is that we're going to look and disclose the secrets of the body to learn why this person died or what malformation they had. In distinction to, we're here to help people live better. And if you're going to do that, you would probably talk to people who live to 100. Go to the former prime minister to be the first person you should talk to, perhaps. Right? How do you have people live to 100? But rather, we spend our time with dead bodies. It's a shift because it is the commitment to reductionism. That we can explain what's happening to people and why they die by just digging down in deep. I am not saying, because there are people here in the anatomy department, I'm not saying that's not valuable. I'm saying this philosophical commitment sets up the way we educate and what the experiences of people are at the outset of donning that white coat. So what happens that human being who we want to help when they're facing some malady, right, which is a body, mind, soul, right, as a person, gets reduced. And what medical education does in all stripes, nursing school, right, in medical school, dentistry, in some sort of way, talks only about two aspects of that human being. Its material, what is it made of, and its formal how is it arranged. We don't really talk in medical education, at least in many places, about what is the purpose of that human being. You might talk about it in some classes on the side, but do we talk about that as actually where this has come from? What is the purpose of that? And do we actually talk about who or what made it? Now, I would wager, I'm not at your medical school, that a medical school that says this Islamic would want to first talk about those things, then talk about what it's made of. Right? What's the purpose of life? What's the purpose of life? Then how do we help people fulfill that purpose? That's our mandate. So the clear entity, this is going to be another part where I engage you in the audience, because the clear merging of this notion of naturalism, that we can explain everything that happens to people by biological, physical, right, grounding, right, and reductionism, that the substrate leads to the whole or explains the whole's phenomenon, is this entity here. So what is that? A cartoon representing? Huh? Sorry? No? What is it? What am I representing with this cartoon? Huh? Neuro, yes, but what? Okay. I haven't heard it yet, but I know there's an interesting Malay term. Because a colleague of mine did her PhD here, and she learned Malay when you were debating whether this thing was truly death. So this is brain death, right? Right? I mean, she learned Malay. This is a German person who came here and learned Malay because she was very interested in how this Muslim culture created a term for brain death. I don't know but it's an interesting term, is my understanding. But I said to you, reductionism and naturalism combined, right? What does brain death represent? Because I know your law. So what does it represent? Dysfunction. So someone who's brain dead is not dead? Is someone who's brain dead in Malaysia dead? Yes? Yes? They've died. Okay. What does that mean? That if your brain isn't working, then you are no longer a human being. Right? Why is that reductionism? Because your entire essence is tied up to that brain, to that physical, material entity. Right? If you were to say to me, the human being, the human being has a soul, the human being is this, okay, but no. The human being is just a brain. Without the brain, there is no human, because you're dead. Right? So I said to you that biomedicine is infused with philosophical and epistemological commitments. This is the example that the human being is just a brain, the rest of it, and for the neurologists here, they love that, right? Because the rest of the body only works to provide nutrients to the brain, yes? So that is the pinnacle of the idea. But my point to you is that your entire existence as a human being is reduced to a functioning brain. Therefore, this entity becomes instantiated in the culture as death. I'm not saying that there are not ways. There's many commitments here. So let me make it more clear. There's a biological claim, right, that the malfunctioning of a brain does not allow the organism to maintain homeostasis or so on and so forth. That biological claim, right, that we go and do in the lab, you can say this is a problem because if you can't regulate your homeostasis, the organism will die. Fine. On top of that is later clinical claim that someone who has reached the state of brain death, I, as a physician, cannot offer anything to restore them to consciousness. That's a clinical claim. Today's claim. 20 years from now, that might not be the case. Right? So you have a biological claim that then attaches to a clinical claim to make the metaphysical claim that no longer the person exists. No longer life exists. No longer is there anything here to do anything with. Right? That's how biomedicine works. Biology leads to clinical treatment, and then it makes a metaphysical claim, but in a way that you don't recognize as a metaphysical claim. So that leads to social implications, like this term that I don't know Malay, but this term that represents brain death. Even in English, the term brain death is odd, right? What do you mean? People die. Do I say toe death? Do I say kidney death? I say kidney failure. But the term is odd and leads to social implications of what we value. And then when you talk to patients, they say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand. And there's policy implications. For us in the United States, we have 2 states, we have 50 states, but 2 states that allow for religious claims against brain death. They say that if you have a religious claim that doesn't accept this entity, we will not consider the person who has this state to be dead. We will wait till their heart and lungs stop. Okay? There's policy implication because in the United States we have, this is not because of Muslims, this is for other religious groups. And this allows for people to, at least one of the most important events in one's, I don't want to say life, is how, most important aspects of one is how you die. And so we don't want to cause people trauma, or really the family that's their trauma, by just saying, no, you're dead, when they still think there's something here. Okay. This idea was used by a king of a Muslim country who would come to the United States for treatment. Okay? Because the United States has the best hospitals, obviously, right? So he would come for treatment, but the embassy said, if this person reaches a state for brain death, you cannot declare him dead. You cannot declare him dead. That is the condition for treatment and what we will pay. And because he can only be claimed dead when he is in our country. So you will transport him as a live person throughout that many, many hour journey. And hospitals in the United States said, okay, fine. So it has policy implications, but legal implications. So for the staff, what does that mean? That the VIP doesn't even die? Right? But the person on the street, he's dead before he gets into the hospital because we're not going to provide any treatment. Moral injury, as we call it in the United States. So this is the idea of the malady of medicine. Let me move forward. So you can then understand why there's this, for us, I know that Malaysia wants to talk a lot about AI and AI in healthcare, but it makes it easier then to understand why a physician could never interact with the patient but diagnose and treat. And if this is our role, just look at the biological chemicals, look at the lab tests, look at the imaging studies. You actually never need to talk to them. We can get all the data extracted from the patient, don't even talk to them, diagnose them, treat them, be done. If that's our role, then why are you scared? AI could do that better than us. Right? Chatbots are thought by patients to be more empathetic than humans. True. Data. Rated by patients. Because they have unlimited time. So the humanness of the encounter is lost. Because, and is seen as not valuable, because we have adopted a reductionistic, naturalistic paradigm of medicine. You're not going to be safe from that. We are consumers of this global phenomenon. We would have to justify our existence. What do you do that these things can do better, more efficiently, more cost effectively? Why pay doctors so much money? Okay. Next question for this group. So this has implications upon doctoring. So now I want to hear a student, a trainee. What's the relationship between doctors and diseases? There's no one who's a trainee here? In the back? Oh, the director of the hospital said I can ask from the back. I thought students had to sit up front. Can someone from a trainee tell me what's the relationship between diseases and doctors? It's not hard. What do doctors do to diseases? Treat diseases, okay. Another idea? Diagnose diseases, okay. Very good. Very good. A third idea? Cause? You said cause diseases? Well, that might be true. That's close enough. Doctors cause diseases. So oftentimes when I speak to medical students, the first thing they say is cure, treat. That's why they went to medicine, right? I want to cure and treat diseases. Then they realize that perhaps we can combat diseases, right? This motif of sort of war, right? We can eliminate disease. But I would argue that sociologically, the most important function of doctors is actually to define diseases, which creates the power differential between you and the rest of society. When you put on that white coat, right? I'm just using that as a metaphor. You have removed yourself from the community because of this aspect. Yes, you can cure and treat, but I told you there's a popular domain, right? That people can cure and treat. There's a folk domain. But this power leads to a lot of things after that, right? So, raise your hands now. This first question, is being too short a disease? Yes? Who says yes? Too short is a disease. Huh? Just yes, this notion. You were there yesterday, so you can't answer. But is being too short a disease? Because we have the power of definition. Is being too short a disease? No? No. Good, fine, okay. Maybe some of you have heard of dwarfism. Yeah. But it's not a disease, so I'm glad that you're going to take it out of your medical textbook. All right, next one. Is having ears but being deaf a disease? No? Yes. One person says yes, but the rest? It's disability. Okay. All right, so most people say no. What about being childless? Is this a disease? Yes. It's abnormal. Sheikhna, the question is a yes, no question. Okay, so I want you to recognize that the reality is that all of these things have been classified as diseases by the biomedical paradigm. All of them. Right? So yes, we have people of differing heights in society, but we certainly can call somebody having idiopathic short stature, right? Because they are 2 standard deviations below the height that they should be based in society. It's idiopathic because we don't know why, but still the power is we can label you as disease, as having short stature, and not only can we do that, we can actually give you things to make you better, right? Give you hormones. We have reproductive technology that can help people have children. So we call infertility a disease. If a couple has conjugal relations for a year and have no known fertility disorder and are unable to conceive, they are called an infertile couple. Right? And then we offer them reproductive technology. So much so that we strain ourselves technologically as a society to figure out what can we do and can we not do, right? So we have health technology like sperm and egg donation in some places. We have uterus transplantation to help people who have absolute uterine factor infertility. Let's transplant a uterus so they can have a child themselves. We have gestational surrogacy arrangements within the healthcare system and outside of, right? And we have this ability today where we can potentially reproductively clone, right? We can do it, we certainly do it for animals. I mean, you must know this, right? We do this for people's pets who have a lot of money. We can clone their pets. So that means technology exists for us to do it for humans. But this other thing is really interesting, right? There's a debate. We can denucleate a sperm, right? And take that nucleus and put it in a donated ovum and allow a couple that only has sperm to have a child through gestational surrogacy. I'm being very precise in my language because I think you know what I'm saying. And the conversation is whether or not that is a right for humans to have, and therefore society should pay for it. Just like you would pay for IVF for a couple that has one egg and one sperm. Because if we're about equality of opportunity in society, why not? This is a current live debate within certain societies, drawn out because what has happened in a health care system, social arrangements are not seen as important or valuable. We can certainly adopt, in the Muslim world we say kafala, right? And we can certainly have polygamy, right?
Very, very quiet again.
But my point isn't that whether these are right or wrong. Your values will help you think about that. My point is the conversation is about synthetic gametes for couple, right, as opposed to polygamy. Because of the notion of what biomedicine is for, how it should tackle these sorts of things, and when we label it a disease, right? Those other things wouldn't be disease cures, but they're a way to have people have children, right? Okay. And you know that for us as Muslims, I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, so I mentioned that thing about rights, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never tells us that there's a right to have children. In this verse, He tells, وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The notion of having children comes from His ability to, His dominance, right? His milkiyah here, milkiyah, that He has control of everything. يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ. He creates يَهِبُ لِمَن يَشَاءُ إِنَاثًا وَيَهِبُ لِمَن يَشَاءُ ذُكُورًا. He gives and bestows upon people men and female children. But at the end, He says, that He also makes people barren in this case, not having a child. So this is a grant, a grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not a right to be had. When we talk about fiqh, often, and I'm going to get into my notions of maqasid a little later, we have adopted this notion that we should be doing something for people. Right? It's about agential action. But before you use the armamentarium of fiqh, we have to think about, is this theologically theologically something that we should be thinking about? Right? Before you get to the act. Okay. So I'll give you further examples, and we're going to stop this first part and move to the second. So aging was a disease, right? But now with genetic therapy, it is not a disease. Or was aging never a disease? Maybe people should age. Right? I mean, this is the question. It becomes a question, is my point. Maybe aging is what's supposed to happen to people. No, it's a disease that we should treat through genetic therapy. No. If you have what? A fountain of youth, would you not take it? No, I wouldn't take it. I want to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, this is too much trial in this world. You know what I mean? There's a dua. Rasulullah says, no, seriously, right? What did Rasulullah told us? I'm not on the Islamic part, but the Sahaba, and you know this, and the Ustads here, and the people here, but people were facing trouble. Some of them had issues with their stomach, and they asked, "Can we make dua for death?" And no. But then Rasulullah gave us a dua that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me life, if there's khair in life, but bring to me death if there's khair in death. Meaning what we search for is khair. Not living. Life is an instrument. Not death. Death is an instrument. What we want is khair and follow. So for us, if that is in dying, Rasulullah said, Rafiq al-A'la, right? I'm not saying I want death in that sense. I'm simply saying that perhaps as dunya is the prison of the believer, perhaps that is for some people. So anyway, this is a notion for physicians because we have narratives that men against death or women against death, that we should be combating death. So I'll skip this slide here, but my point is that disease is not an easy thing to define. But physicians and biomedical scientists define it in many different ways. And we label people as diseased, and in a corporatized economy, then we can offer them solutions. Which is what happens, right? That commodification of health and corporatization of healthcare delivery, because we have some tools to make your lives better, and perhaps it's for you to never age, or perhaps you have children, or perhaps for you X, Y, Z, then biotechnology is used to provide those things. Our vision of life through medicine informs how we practice. Right? Our vision of life. So if the vision of life is we have to live forever, then that's how we're going to treat or use medicine for that purpose. And certainly if there's money to be had in living forever, then let's use medicine and doctors' vitality to make people live forever.
Does it mean that if you seek for treatment,
Yeah.
then that's something you are seeking for is called a disease?
If you seek treatment, then the thing that you're seeking for becomes labeled a disease. If you're interacting with the allopathic healthcare system, yeah, right? Because you would say your licensure offers you certain things they can provide in the system. We're regulated by the things we can do. If someone asks us to do something that's outside of that licensure, or the MOH's sort of guidelines, then we can't do it. So if they seek something that's within those boundary points, then it's something that we would say is a disease, because the system is set up in such a way that you have codes to bill for that, and you have licensure to regulate your skills around that.
It might be a disease.
Yeah, this is an open question. It's an open question today. So moving to now the Islamic part for a second. I said the second part, right? This slide is not supposed to be here, but it's here. So before I get to the Islamic part, let me tell you that even things that are life-saving, like organ donation and transplantation, become part of a larger system that has to regulate transfer of money to provide services, right? And we can't escape that. But this morning, when I was with your hospital director, he mentioned that in the country neighboring to you, well, there's a division between how close you can get there, but it's very close to you. They have a lot of hospitals that are based on waqf, right? And part of that, for our tradition, most hospitals in the classical Muslim era were based on waqf, because it removes this sort of commercialized, in a certain way, prospect that you provide to some because of this or that, right? In the United States, for Mayo Hospital, which is a hospital that many people might have heard of, all doctors are paid the same. So even if the neurosurgeon is bringing in $1 million because they're doing amazing things, he gets paid as much as a GP, right? In a sense, there's bonuses, so it's not fully. But the point is that we don't want people to have such disparities and go into certain professions, not others. We want to try to remove the motivation for only certain people getting certain procedures done. Okay. So I mentioned this yesterday, but today I'll say that my concern in the biomedical paradigm, that its end is this. This is what it's moving towards. That if we just think of human beings as biological entities with nothing else, then we should try to make that biological better. Perhaps that biological is better by giving synthetic things. So make the arms stronger, right? Make the eyes better, right? Make them be able to do other things. Because the biological is just a functional, instrumental part for some other goal. And that is already occurring today. So you might say, no, cyborgs is a science future, but actually, right, the reality is that people today can pay a lot of money and have physicians help them to never age. And he was 45, I'm now 18, right? My telomeres only say I'm 18 through genetic manipulation. So this is the challenge, that do we have a core where we say, no, this is not part of medicine or not? Okay. So the maladies, again, for us, before we get to Islamic, this I think part you will know. So I'll only mention gloss over it. But the maladies is that it's a reductionistic of what the human being is, right? It is corporatized. And the symptoms that we see of people being disenchanted with medicine and the healthcare system that is broken, part and parcel, those are the roots of that, I would argue. So what does the Quran or what does the Islamic vision offer before I get to my Muslim vision? Well, we know that for us, through the Quran and through the Nusus, that our vision of health and healthcare is one where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control of both ends. Right? Ibrahim al-Islam in the Quran is quoted to say that when I am ill, it is He who cures me. And in Hadith, it is much clearer that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down that He sends down illnesses or trials and cures, right? That it is God-centric in this way, that we recognize that there is downward causation, right? From Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to what is happening to us. Now, what does that mean for health itself? That health, therefore, is not something that's intrinsically part of your body. Rather, it is a grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to whom He chooses. And to receive that grant, you must act in a certain way. Right? That you are not deficient should you not have a body that is certainly healthy. Do you understand? Because if we were to say that health is the normal condition of a body that's functioning, then the individual who does not have that, you say they are dysfunctional, disabled, they're diseased. But if you were to say, no, health is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants to some people, right? Then you will say, well, the person who is not healthy is no lesser human than me. They're no different than I am, but rather I have something that I am going to be accountable for, which is what the hadith tell us, right? We often talk about that your salah is the first thing to be asked about, but this hadith tells us that as what? Did I not give your body health? Did I not give your body health? You'll be asked for it because it's a grant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So it's a different paradigm of labeling disease then, because it comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a further example, not on the slide, but when Ayyub alayhi salam, right, was afflicted, what is his dua? أَنِّي مَسَّنِيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. That I have been afflicted, look at I have been afflicted by dur, by harms, وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. But you, O Allah, are the most merciful or merciful. Right? فَاسْتَجَبْنَا لَهُ. And then we answered him. So the point here is that our exemplars, and this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you must cultivate health. Yes, you must take responsibility for your body, but it is not this immediate notion that someone who doesn't have something that someone else does have is somehow lesser. Yet, as we know, the one who has strength, right, can do more good works. So that is all instrumental to the akhirah. Health is a grant from God, right, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is instrumental in value, and it can be a characteristic of the body, but it is not fully reducible as such. Which then means your profession now of healthcare, right, becomes fardu kifaya because it helps people do more good works. But seeking healthcare is not fard. Why? Yes, the Shafis, I know this is Shafi town. Shafis love this hadith because Rasulullah says, Tadawu, ibadallah, the command form. And so they say, okay, it is not just mubah, but it is mandub, right? It is sunnah to take healthcare. But the other four madahib, I said four for a reason, but let's say the three Sunni madahib, yes, don't take that notion. Okay? Because of the other hadith, Rasulullah talks about this notion that people who do not take, this is a vision he has in Islam Miraj, that they don't take qadari, right, get to Jannah bighayri hisab, without reckoning. So to combine that, the other Sunni schools now say, no, it's just permissible, it could be recommended. So we're not mandated to seek healthcare. That's the fiqh level. But what sits on top of the fiqh level? I said theology, right? So the reason is because you can draw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attention to your plight in many ways. So while medicine, scientifically, we say that healthcare is only 10%, 15% of one's health status, Islamically, healthcare seeking is even less. Because you have hadith to tell you that give sadaqah to cure your ill. You can make dua is efficacious. Every Jum'ah we have an imam who makes dua for people who are sick in our community. Why would we do that if we didn't think there's some truth to that, right? Why would we, have people who do ruqyah if we didn't believe ruqyah has some power? This is all confirmed from the nusus. So for an Islamic hospital, I'm not saying you have a department of raqi. Okay, I'm saying that you have to understand as Muslim physicians, Islamic physicians, that your role in helping people is a small role. Right? And we should not reduce the wasi'ness of our tradition to just, I give you health and I give you health care. Rather, you don't give anybody health. You're lucky if Allah uses you to do something beneficial for the patient. The most important thing, however, is the adab of the patient. So this hadith tells us what? You can read it. But that when Allah SWT afflicts, because disease comes, or maladies come from Him, He's chosen someone to have that malady, that He sends angels, right? And iyadat al-marid, you call it ziyarah here, but iyadat al-marid, the visiting of sick, right? That Allah SWT says to the angels, see how my servant responds to those who visit him. And if he does what? Right? If he praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And then what happens? That if I cause him death, that person will enter Jannah. That's the maqam. Even the person's ill, enters Jannah, right? But if I give him shifa'ah, then I will change his lahm, his body with better body, his blood with better blood, right? And I will then do what? Kafara. That this illness will be a kafara for the individual. So this hadith, and there are others like this, tell us what? That the comportment, the adab of the individual, as they're being faced by disease, is what draws Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attention. And when you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attention towards you, then He can grant you Jannah, because we have hadith about people who have illnesses are shuhada, in certain types of illnesses. Or He can grant you Jannah, or He can make this a kafara for you, kafara al-dhunub, and replace you with better bodies. So it's the adab, and it is the adab that helps us understand what's happening. So you as physicians need to recognize that there's a larger theological, ontological plane at play when you visit the patient. But oftentimes we are trained to just think about us and our role. The opposite also happens, where this is a hadith, another one you can read it, where Rasulullah visits someone who's ill, and we're taught, la bas tahur, right? Like we're taught, our hadith, we're told when we visit someone who's sick, we say that don't worry, this is tahur, inshallah, this is a spiritual cleansing for you. So Rasulullah says that, right? But what did the individual say to Rasulullah? No, this illness is hardship for me, it's going to bring me to the grave. And then what does Rasulullah say? It will be so. That the adab with which you treat those who visit you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching. And your outcome as a Muslim, in some ways, is correlated with how you respond to those who visit you. Now tell me, do we tell our patients this? I mean, do we talk about this? But this is our tradition, right? That there's a theological reality at play. So again, this is the Islam component, and I'll move to my vision and we'll close for Q&A. But we know that the human being is more than just a body, and that any of these parts and components, right, can be trialed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that the individual is in a journey of getting moved from illness to wellness, right? They're on a journey, and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watching. And that relationship between the individual and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what leads to the outcome. Certainly healthcare is part of that. You shouldn't ignore healthcare, and by this healthcare I mean us, right? The allopathic healthcare system, but it's not the sum totality of what someone's going through. They're on a journey. And that accompaniment is what we as physicians need to think about. And it was always the case in our tradition. Yes, we had the Badistans, right, in the Muslim era, and they would have all sorts of therapies there, but they recognized that their role was part of a larger societal role of how to help people. Right? It wasn't just them only. And that the physician was not just ministering to the body because they were technically competent, but rather was caring for the individual and being present with them. And that the physician, the idea was always the case, not just in the Muslim tradition, that to have efficacy for your treatment, you must be a good person. So the emphasis upon becoming a good person in your training was perhaps even more so than the technical competence. Right? So we, as I said to you as I started this talk, that we are privileged as clinicians, that we are, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifesting Himself, right, in people who are birthed. We are here where life and death happens in this building, and that they are leaving this world to the portal of death. And we get to live out the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as people who provide cure. It is sharaf for us to be able to do this, to have this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such that when we enter the patient encounter, we are actually in audience with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not just the malaika are watching us. As we are told in the Hadith Qudsi that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks, right, in the Day of Judgment, I was ill, you did not cure me. Well, so-and-so, fulan, Abdul is sick, but if you had visited him, you'd find him with me. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in that room. And so much so that the person that we say is ill, or society would say is ill, and is impoverished, is elevated, such that ask the invalid to make dua for you, for their dua is the dua of the malaika. So our paradigm is totally inverted. It is us who are benefiting by being able to take care of individuals. And societally, so if you don't believe whatever I'm saying, yeah, it makes sense sort of theologically. Look societally. You can have a car and live in a nicer building than your patients. Why? Because someone is providing you the money from them to you. You're even benefiting in this world. Right? So we should be honoring them. So moving to that's the Islamic, I'll move to Muslim vision. This is some distance there. How do we then bring these things together? Where we have a biomedical paradigm and we have an Islamic notions of what health and healthcare are about. So the obvious answer would be that first you have to not be thinking about putting our heart at the center, but for us it would be putting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the center. Right? Your campus, the undergraduate, the medical university campus, has a masjid in the center for a specific reason. That design element was set up there for a specific reason. Your hospital, as I learned, has musallas on every floor for a specific reason. That in this building, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is at the center of what we're doing. So if we say, as the Quran tells us that, right, Allah nur as-samawati wal ard, mathalu nuri ka mashkat, right, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the nur, then for us to be able to do what we do as clinicians requires us to get that nur. Through what? Through practices that across the eons people have done to become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps tahajjud is our duty. The responsibility of us is higher than the awam. Our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must be more stronger. And that when we leave the patient room, perhaps we must be making dua for the patient and asking the patient to make dua for us. Perhaps. I'm not saying this is my notion of not just fiqh, but it's this adab that we should have. I myself fall short, but I'm saying that perhaps that's our role. So what medicine then is not biomedicine I gave at the beginning of the talk, but rather it is an infusion of adab and character, such that it is science, certainly. It is certainly skill sets, but it is imbued with what we say virtue. Right? Your university calls itself the Bustan al-Ilm wal-Fadila. So there is this notion of virtue that is the craft of medicine. It is not a technical science or a profession. It's a craft. And then the goal of that is to preserve and help individuals restore health, because the individual is a composite of a body and a soul. But ultimately, so this is you didn't hear about this, but I lead the initiative on Islamic medicine. And you will notice that our logo has Hakim in there. And we say we want to instill hikmah in healthcare. Why? Because our tradition says that the physician is a Hakim. You use it in common parlance today, but in the full sense of that. And what does that mean? That the person must be wise. Practical wisdom. Where do you get wisdom? From practice. It's not knowledge. It's not a data store. It's not the AI bot. That you have to be Hakim because that is a name and attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And that you must be then ethical and virtuous because through that ethics and that virtue, you will lead to better outcomes for yourself and the patient. So that's the mantle. That's the white coat that should be emblazoned with Hakim for you to be able to act in the world as a clinician. So your hospital, mashallah, right? I was reading a lot of things here. Also notes this idea is that we want to, for patients, when they come into the hospital, that we want to align, we're committed to Sharia compliance and we would like to align your stay with the principles of maqasid al-Sharia. I'm ending soon. I know I've been up here a long time. Well, what I would say and argue, and I'm being provocative here for a moment, that this is certainly an end goal, to be compliant with Sharia. But before you get to the compliance with Sharia, you have to think about the people who are delivering the care. That the heart and the head must be aligned with the hand that does the act. If we just focus on the act and don't reform the people who are providing care, then we are not doing our full job. And if we don't work on their intentions and help them think about that theological platform that they're engaging in, that we might do the right thing but for the wrong reasons in the corporate climate of healthcare delivery. At the same time, we must think about, yes, our hospitals can be emblazoned, and I am delighted to be here really, with the notion of Sharia compliance. But the system of healthcare has larger forces that will compel us to think about Sharia compliance in certain ways and not others. So we must attack the roots of what healthcare is for in society, right? So your society was saying we need healthcare reform. Perhaps those who have hospitals like this should be involved in that conversation of what is healthcare for? What does health mean? Because the society is what sets up the expectations of what delivery occurs in this building. So you must move beyond these walls, right? To perhaps at least move to the campus next door, have conversations with those other departments and kulliyas about what it means to Islamically to have health and healthcare. Policy-wise, what does it mean in terms of the formation of individuals with character that's Islamic? So I don't have an Islamic hospital. I live in a non-Muslim country. So we have noticed this is a problem of formation of individuals. So for medical students in education, I was here, the main reason for my visit was to have this seminar on a professional development workshop related to this curriculum, where we focused on the idea of medical students, right, should treat human beings, but do we talk about in our medical curriculum what the human being is from a religious lens? Or do we ignore it? And so we wanted to have a conversation, we create a curriculum where we bring in religious and bioscientific narratives about the fundamental notion of what the human being is. What's its origin? What's its future? What's its capacity? Because how can you have a practice of medicine that deals with human beings facing challenges and not talk about what your text, your scriptures say about the human being? And beyond that, so this is what we do. Beyond that, the question, this is a question for you. We talk about Islamic bioethics all the time. And oftentimes people say that what Islamic bioethics is this. This is a fatwa from Mufti, is Islamic bioethics. But for us, we want ethics that's not just about the act, it's about the agents themselves, right? And about the outcomes they want to produce. So it is, yes, certainly tied to the nusus, but it draws upon the entire tradition. It's not reduced just to fiqh. That really it is about that theology, right? That aqidah, the end goal. What does health look like? I was with one of my teachers, and he's a non-physician, so he talked about, he asked about what treatments we were giving patients. And as he said, okay, that sounds very harsh, what you're doing to the patients. I mean, you're giving them things that will kill their own cells, the stem cell transplant, right? And then they will be, why are you doing that? I said, well, this is the medical science. He said, well, it's interesting for me that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala you're trying to be living out the ideal of being a Shafi'i, but that's a name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's associated with His rahmah. So if you do these things, what is the rahmah in it? It was I'm not saying this wrong. I'm saying he had a question because he lived in a different worldview, where he was posing the question for us as physicians, are you living out that rahmah, the jalli? What kind of aspect are you doing for care? So for us, that's the end goal. Then the legal ethics of the fiqh, but the other aspect is the adab, as already mentioned to you. So if you're going to have Islamic bioethics programs, you must bring these three things together. Now how? And I'm going to end soon. But before I do so, I just said something about fuqaha and ulama that perhaps they don't have a full conceptualization. When you read the fatawa related to medicine, and you have a course that's taught about fiqh of medicine, you will notice that the two dominant constructs that they rule on are based on darura or maslaha. Darura, necessity, maslaha, benefit. Now, that concept necessarily involves looking at the world itself to determine whether that exists. Darura means, right, life threat. How do you know there's a life threat? You physicians will tell the alim and the faqih and the sheikh, look, this person has this percentage chance of dying. You must interrogate the world through empirical science. Benefit, maslaha, you will say we should do organ donation because of benefits to people. Who's going to tell the faqih that? The sociologist, the epidemiologist, right? That this is where benefit accrues. So there is necessary relationship between yourselves and the fuqaha in that dialogue. And so our vision of Islamic bioethics is one that brings together the three sources, at least three sources of morality in the tradition. It brings in questions from clinical practice and health policy, but certainly interrogates these other sciences, because you have to have a full conceptualization of the problem space from all these scientists to then render a ruling or a judgment or a policy. I already said this, but these three things must come together in educational curricula to form the human being that is Islamic: act-based, agent-based, and end-goal-based ethics. And then you can have people say, not what can I do, but what should I do? Right? The Western ethics always talks about should. And alhamdulillah, for us, we have fiqh to tell us what we can. But only can we move when you bring these things together, from permissibility to ihsan. When you connect the production of good to beings who are good. Lastly, I just want to mention one thing here, and then we will close. So I was having a conversation earlier today with individuals in this room, and I was talking about, well, how do you inculcate adab? Because oftentimes people tell you what to do, but I would argue that to get virtue, you need to actually read and reflect. Who are the examples for us? Who is the example in our tradition of the ultimate physician? In the scripts, you would say it's Isa alayhi salam. But we have in our tradition exemplars of moral virtue who are physicians. Ibn Asaq, right? And others. Ibn al-Nafis. So you must, not just because we want to say, oh, Muslims are the top of the world, but rather, how did they practice? What were they talking about as moral exemplars for us? And then when we go and do these things, this is what we have set up through my initiative for Muslim students, they will actually go wash the dead. You guys do this too, right? To the janazah. But we're not focusing on fiqh. What was that experience like? What does it mean for you as a future physician? How did you think that went? What sorts of virtues should you adopt? How are you going to inhabit the space when someone's family member is going to die? Will you go visit them when they're your family, or when they're your patient? Because it's about accompaniment and adopting virtues of being a human first, a doctor second. So I already mentioned this, so I will end with saying that yes, the healthcare system in America perhaps is broken, but it's globally broken. So maybe we don't talk about hospitals as that broken system, but rather as God's hotel. That the people who are coming here are the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore we should treat them in a certain way. I will close, inshallah, with saying that I know a little bit about your system here. And again, I want to say, mashallah, that you guys are leading the notion of being in father-friendly hospitals and Sharia compliance and Islamization. So whatever I've said is just a picture from where I'm at. It might be that there's much more to be said about the system that you already have. And I encourage you to write about that. That's why I told them this earlier this morning. That the Muslim world, the world writ large, wants to see how to be better. Perhaps you should be doing more outreach to do that. That we have some components of what could be a better way to deliver healthcare, to make this God's hotel. Let us tell you how. Or what we did, let's test it. Because as an academic institution, it's about producing knowledge. And this is knowledge that's direly needed by the rest of the world. You have this component that perhaps you can add in your hospitals. We talked about earlier today about spiritual care accompaniment. You might call it ziyarah, you might call it chaplaincy, but it's about spiritual care and accompaniment of patients who are facing challenges in their lives and their health. That perhaps your research ethics could be based on what is Islamic, not just fiqh-wise, but why we do research. What do we do with that research? What's the purposes of that? because this book that I put on the screen is a PhD thesis of a mentee, now colleague of mine, who found, she spent time in 3 Muslim countries, that there was very odd views on what the Islamic research ethics was. And I know that you have a hospital committee that deals with that. And perhaps you should infuse some ethics committees, but that's my own thing. We can talk about the Q&A, because I already know you have a very robust Sharia advisory committee that perhaps does all of what an ethics committee would do and more. So I'll end with saying I was very delighted to visit this initiative of yours, which certainly shows that the fruits of the Bustan are here. That mashallah, that you're doing amazing things to help people and help children and neonates in a way that brings together Islam and medicine, right? You have a disease that needs help and you do it in a way that Islamically is validated without just borrowing stock and whole what the Western world tells you to do. And this book of mine is free access. I know there's a lot about maqasid, but I just want to put this up for you. You can get it online, inshallah ta'ala. That just came out Friday before I was flying here. So perhaps there will be further conversations on this, but I would love to hear your thoughts. So barakallahu feekum, jazakallahu khairan, assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Prof. Aasim Padela, for that talk. I'm sure many of us have gained valuable knowledge from your sharing. Now we will open the floor for a Q&A session. So if you have a question, please use the microphone and please move to the center in the middle of the hall. So is there any questions from the audience? Hold on. No. Yes, sure. Ada portable mic? Ada. Apa?
This morning we were talking about in this country, don't talk so much about that. So perhaps if you can share your experience. Yes.
Sure.
With regards to
Sure. Do I need that mic back or? So I think this is a very, very interesting global conversation around euthanasia, or that older term has now been changed into terms like death with dignity, assisted dying, and so on and so forth. So I want you to think for a moment, for those of you young, and that you went into medicine to do what? To help people, right? Did you think that helping someone die is part of medicine? Okay. So helping someone, right? Because oftentimes when you're a youth, I mentioned this, right, earlier this morning, that you don't think about the end of a human being's life. Now, their good death is also part of our notion, but that good death comes from a philosophy of what life is about. So the conversation in the West is around control. There's a survey, I don't have it here, I can show you, but they went and did focus groups of people and they said, what are the top things that make your notion of good death? And the top one was control. I want to die and be controlled when I die. But in Muslim audiences, that wasn't the first thing. And I forgot what it was. But my point is that the philosophy of life informs how you want to die. So then it makes sense for them, if people want to die with control, doctors can help them get control by giving them medicine to help them end their own lives, or giving them medicine so their life ends. And that's a right, in their view, in the dominant narrative of an individual, because we also have a right not to be born in law. Now you have a right to die in law. In the United States, 32 states out of the 50 have come up with these laws, which makes the profession of medicine, I mentioned to you that your societal expectations set up what you're supposed to do. So the question then becomes, physicians should be providing the services, meaning either you help them actively die, or you provide them referrals to others who will help them die if they want to die, if they meet certain conditions. And what are those conditions? Where the quality of life is diminished. Again, the philosophy of life leads to the notions of what this profession does. So my experience is the following. You asked me my experience. that I think, and there are many, not me as Muslim, but others, who think this is an anathema to the profession of medicine. Meaning, yes, we have to help people have a good death, but not perform death, not to conduct death. That it is an anathema, it is against the profession. Do not harm, right? Do not kill. Or these are, do not harm's our profession, not, right? But do not kill is the commandments, and they would say, for human beings. So what has happened is that this flow has been somewhat buttressed by religious groups, not Muslim, but Christian groups that say we're not going to allow this to happen in our state, and they talk to policymakers, and those states still don't have a policy. But in the UK and in Canada, Muslims lost the lawsuit. So it is the responsibility of those who are licensed by the state to provide medical care to be able to provide or refer people towards death with dignity, which might mean them taking pills or getting chemicals to die themselves, or potentially even assisting them in a certain way. But certainly, should they try to kill themselves, you will then resuscitate them, potentially. In the UK, there's a bill now to have the law of the land in the UK to do the same. So I think we are in a battle of values here. This is the jihad, about what the profession is for. And it is the political leadership that will decide for us. And so we must be engaged with them. Right? So my personal view and what I've read from the fuqaha and our philosophy of medicine is that this shouldn't be part of medicine. I saw one writing from someone from Saudi that said perhaps you could, but aside from that, I never read anything else.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Now we're still open for questions. So should you require some questions? Yes.
Thank you very much for asking. I'm not a medical doctor, but since I enjoyed the discussion and talk, I thought I can make some kind of a comment, which also requires it's a form of question, but I want to make it as a comment. Yes. When you mentioned just now the issue of IVF and then you quoted the Quranic ayat about infertility treatment and the issue of fertility, and then you just mentioned that sometimes we treat infertility as a disease, right? So I'm not looking at it from a medical perspective, but I have read somewhere, I think most of us did, the discussion among the Muslim jurists on the issue of fertility and infertility, So this is just to review our reading and our understanding is that I know there have been two types of opinions. Number one, they said that infertility treatment is not permissible. Some of the arguments, and they said that because, according to their understanding, because this issue of fertility belongs to Allah. وَيَجْعَلُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ عَقِيمًا, as we quote in the ayah, right? So the word uqum for them, which is associated according to the ayah to Allah, means someone to become fertile or infertile. That is the business of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, according to them, right? Chapter 42, verse number 49, 50. So according to them, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it is He who makes whom He wants infertile. If a medical doctor wants to say, well, I can provide for you infertility treatment, that means you are interfering the business of God, right? Which is not acceptable according to them, according to that view. And therefore, for them, the equation, the whole permissibility of the issue of infertility treatment. But to my understanding and to my reading, I think the majority of them, you corrected me, the majority of the ulama, they said, well, actually, you guys confused it, with this ayah, the interpretation of the ayah. They agreed that the ayah says, because it's clear. But the interpretation of the ayah for them, the way the previous group understood the equation, their understanding, and they said there are two types of infertility. Permanent infertility, which cannot be cured by all means, and infertility that is curable. You can have some. So for them, probably they may say that the Plovian tubes maybe somehow is closed, therefore we can, or maybe the ovum is not strong enough, or the sperm, therefore more like a reach. I'm not going to go into the details of that, right? So this is how they put it, if I correctly remember. As long as the infertility can be cured by means of medicine or medical treatment, for them they don't consider it as an infertility. They deal with it, as you said, as a disease. Why? Because they said that the characteristics of the living things, when we study in biology class, in our primary school biology, they say that reproductive and growth, right? So by nature, human beings, when you are born, by nature you should be that fine, right? To reproduce. But the fact that his family is married to certain period, and then it's not having, not conceiving a lady, that means there is a disease that is blocking or preventing her to become pregnant. So therefore, as long as there is a medical treatment for infertility, for them, they don't consider it as a what do you call infertility. They consider it as a disease which medical doctors must treat or should treat or ought to treat, right? But for them, is true only when there is no, medical treatment for it. So probably you can comment on that.
So I appreciate the clarification. So I'd like to hear from students, but let me give you kind of what register I'm talking at, and then kind of what we were saying. So my concern, when the way this talk was developed, right? I said that physicians have the power of labeling diseases. Once you label something a disease, then the medical industrial complex brings biotechnology forth to address that disease, and says that you doctors, because you treat diseases, are licensed to do that. That's the biomedical model. The biomedical model therefore says that all causes of diseases reside where? Within the body. Okay? So I am saying that, look at that, that's the biomedical model. We have people who don't have children. I'm not saying they don't desire children, they don't have children. We say you are less than someone who has a child. And you're less, so then you have a disease. And guess what? We now have tools that can provide you with cure for that disease. And therefore, we're going to apply those tools. So the biomedical model took a person with a certain state, a hal, labeled them as diseased, provided cures for the disease, and then you ask the fuqaha, and you should understand the logic here. Oh, well, medicine can cure it. Yeah, but who set up medicine? You create a society to expect medicine to do this, so of course it's mubah. Because the system itself, theologically, was set up this way. Do you understand? What are you going to ask a faqih? This is why I said you can't just deal with the hand. Because you already have cures, you already label people as diseases, so of course, then give them the cure, doctors. Why are you holding it back? But in a different vision where we said, no, people who do not have children don't need to engage with the medical system. Perhaps, okay, I'm sorry this side, perhaps there are other ways to have children, right? Or perhaps it's okay. A woman who does not have a child should not be seen by her mother-in-law to be deficient. Then maybe we don't need medicine to come in. And maybe they're not diseased. So I'm not asking about the fiqh question, of course. Within that, and now also recognize to have IVF, you're doing things that would be normally considered haram. You're exposing your awra. You're creating embryos that are never implanted. Then you might throw them and discard them, or do medical research on them. You've created an entire system that seems a little odd, right? Because then someone's got to pay. And it costs tens of thousands of dollars per IVF treatment. And the healthcare system says, I can only afford one, second you pay. right? Oh, but then we have an embryo, this one might have a little trisomy XYZ, then discard it. That's not worth anything. I mean, how much, what cultural expectations have we set up by the biomedical paradigm? A wasi vision would say, perhaps there's another way to live our lives. And may Allah help all of those who desire to have children, and they don't have children, to have children. May Allah also help all of those who struggle with paying for IVF. May Allah also help all those individuals whose family, social circle thinks that they might be somewhat lesser because they're unable to bear children. But you don't fix any of that by just saying take IVF. So it was a vision for healthcare, not practice for healthcare, that I was trying to give you. And I think we, as sitting in this place, saying that we're an Islamic hospital, Islamic university, and a Sharia hospital, must think about these things at that level to influence societal policies, okay? But you're right about the fiqh, and I'm not saying anything against that. I'm just offering a different view to think about it, because we have created systems that are self-fulfilling, because we create the need in the society, then they come to us, then we provide the need, and how far can we go with that?
Thank you very much, Prof. I would like to add a certain point in Islam, as I have said. الرسول عليه الصلاة والسلام said, ما أنزل الله من داء إلا أنزل له دواء علمه من علمه وجهله من جهله. It means the Prophet tell us that we must search for cure, and Allah, when He sent any disease, He sent the cure. But who knows this one? It may be not, 50 years ago, we leave a lot of cases. We just observe them while dying. Now we can do a lot of things. So I think our Islamization must move this area. We must research. We must come to new things which we can submit to everyone, even we think before that we cannot offer anything.
Yeah. No, mashallah, that's what I was saying. We should do some more work on Islamic research ethics, what the origin is. I think one of the interesting things for me is that, science is the production, the activity of society, right? So your goals and visions, we all talk about this. Oh, why did the Muslims find the astrolabe? Because they had to figure out how to pray. I mean, we do this, right? When we read back our history, the Muslims are trying to figure out how to pray, how to this, so that there was a notion of what we need to do, and that led to what we have to do, which led to a scientific activity. I think we need to reclaim that, because the biotechnology transfer and the research transfer is coming from a different society with a different vision for life, right? And then we just take it and imbibe it and say, okay, these are the values. And they tell us in their colonial fashion, you should just be happy, we're giving you something. But perhaps it should be opposite. We can offer the world something better. Look, we can't cure societal issues through medicine, our medicine. It requires more than us. That was the COVID experience. We can't remove all the ills of disparate incomes in society, lack of access to good food, right? We can't do, medicine isn't the whole of society. We have a limited role, but we certainly can influence all those other sectors to be thinking about health in all policies, right? And that's the mantle that we should have. And that when we do research, it's not just what gives us more profit, right? But rather what is most beneficial. So I'll give you an anecdote. Back in the days, I was in medical school in Cornell, but then the Cornell opened a campus in Qatar, and alhamdulillah, I was one of the first students to go there, to do research there. And there were conversation in Qatar at that time was around childhood diabetes rates were escalating, and obesity was escalating. And what do we do? Qatar is very hot. So the policy debate was the following, okay? The policy debate was, should we create these outdoor gyms and then the Corniche, where people have these bars, right? Or should we invest in a research institute that's going to create a genetic cure for diabetes? Where do you think the money went? Right? It's pretty inexpensive to create walkable. Well, it's hot, and you have to figure out how you're going to do that. I'm sure you can figure that out. But the point was that we want a quick fix cure that's biotechnology high driven. But the reality was that that institute could not, what do you mean? People are trying, like the malaria vaccine. Like, I mean, no, we can't do it, but we would pump millions of dollars into that because we want a quick fix. We don't want to deal with societal issues. We don't want to deal with cultural issues. So I want us to be wary of that we're going to fix society's problems through a biomedical solution and fix. Yeah, and there are people who write books like we can make you more ethical by doing some genetic manipulation, right? To the south. The guy who leads the bioethics center in Singapore. That's his argument. We can create more moral human beings, and it's our duty to do so by genetic manipulation because we have the genes that make people more moral and ethical. That's his book. So again, we shouldn't be thinking about that in that sort of way. Are there any trainees here? I mean, mashallah, the full professors, you're asking all the questions, but there are any trainees here? I guess not. Mashallah. Like, I wanted to give them some chance, right? As opposed to the full professors.
Ideas. I think the knowledge that we are sharing is high level of immunity for the Muslim practitioner. My question is actually how do you discuss these things with Muslims of various level of knowledge and also among the non-Muslims? How do you encourage them? How do you make them believe that their disease or whatever is actually from Allah Ta'ala and they have to have faith and to accept it with
Yeah. So thank you for the question. What I'm presenting to you is sort of a reframe, right, or a different lens through which we look at our profession. And this is not, I mean, I'm offering you a Muslim sort of vision, but I'll tell you that I live in a country that has, I think, 35% of the hospitals have a Catholic vision. They sponsor, and they say that our hospitals are living out Catholic social teaching. They have vice presidents of mission and identity. That this is a Catholic vision of healthcare, being from policies to the people. They have medical schools, Catholics, Jesuits, that take the medical school. It's 4 years in my country, right? After undergraduate, so it's 4 plus 4. They take their students in the Catholic school and in the medical school, and they say, the elite of you can apply to be part of a spiritual order and Ignatian spirituality, and we'll spend your first summer going through and having a spiritual director, think in your mind as a sheikh, who will then be accompanying you through your 4 years of medical school, because we want you to be a follower of Christ first and a good one, and a doctor after that. And only the elite can get in. Out of 225 can get in. Because they have, right? My point, because then they say, then you will be a better practitioner of Jesus' healing mission. It's up front and center. It's baked into the way they think about healthcare. Their vision is there. And do they say we're only going to care for the Catholic patients? No, anybody can go. But when you go into that institution, you know that the people there have a different way of looking at what they're doing. And I'll tell you, some people prefer. I mean, the Muslims sometimes prefer going to those institutions because they recognize the value of religion. They'll try to seek out help for you to be faithful, as opposed to a secular institution. So you ask me, I'm just saying that this is a big thing. You can live out an ideal in a healthcare system. For me and my students, right? We have, I'll give you an exercise. I live in a non-Muslim society. My core group of students, I have 2 of 16 are students who I accompany through their 4 years of medical school. We have reflection exercises, and it's not, I'm not telling them what to do. Just say, you reflect, okay, what does the good mean to you? Write an essay on that. Let's discuss that. What does a good physician look like? Right? And when you're in the wards and you see someone doing something problematic, why is that problematic to you? Help us understand why is that contrary to what you think the profession is about? So it's for them to go on a journey thinking about very intentionally what kind of doctor they want to be. We do an exercise for these first-year medical students where they plan out their death will. How do you want to die? What would it look like? Right? For these 20-year-olds. Because that's not what society is doing. Because we want them to be fully human and then adopt a professional identity on top of that. We do readings. They read journals of people struggling with illness. Right? So my point to you is it's not just a Muslim thing. I'm giving you a Muslim perspective here. But I think this is what needs to be done. And people themselves come up with what that philosophy is. What does good mean to you? What does being a physician mean to you? And then we have them write this essay, 2 pages, and they revise it multiple times during their medical education. But when they graduate, it's in front of them. This is what I committed to, right? This is who I want to be. And then when you're struggling, look at that. Are you living out your life in medicine like that? Are you not? Then maybe your purpose in life isn't met by medicine, right? So anyway, I think that reflection is necessary for us because we're facing many forces that are beyond our control. And for me, as an elder doctor, watching these students do this stuff was actually helpful for me. We started during COVID, and I'm an ER physician, right? I intubated so many people that were going to die. I had them call their parents that this is the last time you're going to talk to your parents. Right? And it was a really difficult time as a physician. And I was the guinea pig, right? Because everybody else is off. We got to take care. You're mandatory in the hospital. Residents are not needed. It's the attending. They're trainees. So going through this again helped me think about why I am in medicine. So I think this is a cycle for all of us, not for medical students, to reflect deeply what our values are and how we're living them out in this practice.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Prof. Aasim. So thank you, Prof. Aasim, for answering the questions. So with that, I think that's conclude our Q&A sessions. So thank you, Prof. Aasim. To express our gratitude, we have a small token of appreciation. I would like to invite Prof. Dr. Muhammad Safi bin Awang to come forward and present the souvenir to Prof. Aasim. Dekat.
Well, barakallah. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Dato. And once again, our heartfelt thanks to Prof. Aasim for his time and valuable insights. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of our program. Thank you all for your participation and for making this session a meaningful one. So for our guests, thank you once again for being with us. Wishing you all a wonderful evening. With that, I end this program with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Done.
Have a good evening.
I have something for you.
Oh, sorry.